Hi, this is Alan from Alpus Group. I'm just going to talk you through how Alpus would evaluate any site typically. So what we're trying to do is evaluate a site for potential gross development value. So this is converting it from its existing use to a new use. It may be commercial building that is unused or underused, or has got a part vacant, such as an upper part of a shop or retail area that's too big for its current usage. So what we're trying to do is establish what we can evaluate as a new use, usually residential, because this is the higher value generally. So what we establish is how many residential units we can get from the site. The minimum size of a one-bedroom unit is 37 square meters, so we may be able to get, for example, two-bedroom units out of it, 50 square meters, or three-bedroom units at probably 60 square meters plus. It just depends on the configuration of the building. So what we do is we do a preliminary assessment of how many units we can get. So the first thing we need to do for that is to look at the site location, the specific address and the postcode. So in order to evaluate any site in England and Wales, we use a number of different tools, software tools, such as Nimbus Maps or Property Data, Property Filter, Searchland, lots of different softwares that we can use to evaluate any particular site. Some of these tools allow us to run the calculations within them. Property data is quite useful as a first pass calculation, because that will give you an evaluation of the existing building for a particular purpose, like an HMO co-living model, or as a development site, or as demolition and reconstruction. So this is a very useful first pass to use property data. We use that one quite often. Nimbus Maps is good for evaluating the residential values in an area, or the commercial values in a particular area. It can also give you a lot of information about the building area that exists on the site at the moment, building heights and so on. If we say, using the Nimbus Maps example, we enter the specific address and postcode, or we may have the title number, in which case we can enter the title number and search on that. Nimbus Maps will show the site area, built areas on the site, the number of buildings and the area of each floor level and the height of each building. So there are different layers on the software in Nimbus Maps, and we can identify whether the building is listed or if it's in a conservation area. We can also check if the building is in a flood zone of a river or the sea. So the quick cut is that if the building is in a flood zone, particularly at ground level, then there's no way we would do residential there. It's just too much of a risk. You can also check the planning policy in the current area is, to see what the local planning authority envisages for that area. So you can look at the history of planning applications on that site and their status, whether they were approved or rejected, or if they're under consideration or under appeal, if an application has already been rejected. So additionally, from Nimbus Maps, you can also see what the current average residential value in the particular area you're researching. Point 3, having obtained basic information from Nimbus Maps, Alpus uses property data to calculate the possible gross development value. So this is what I was saying about inputting the address and postcode, using the information gleaned from Nimbus Maps, input the gross area before development and after development. It may be that you use the existing building and then you extend it as well. Thus we calculate the new additional construction area if it is refurbishment and extension. Alternatively, we can calculate for a complete demolition and new build on the site. So we may well carry out a few different calculations for different development options. We can then compare the likely costs and the respective returns associated with each option. We can thus conclude a preferred option to move forward with. We then, when we want a more detailed view of the projected costs, we use some other proprietary construction estimating software to double check the cost figures we have from property data. Significantly, when you use property data, they use a default of 4% for contingency, which in my experience is usually not enough, particularly at very preliminary stage. You need to use at least 10%, but sometimes more. This is because you just don't know what problems you're going to come across, and until you can get in and ascertain the detail, you can't evaluate the risks. So we're very keen on risk assessment, and what we will do is we'll carry out a preliminary risk assessment on the project. Preliminary risk assessment will identify the top 5 to 10 risks on the project and allocate a percentage for contingency for the budget. So at this stage, contingency, a minimum of 10% must be allowed, and it could be a greater amount since designs are not yet available, and we're at effectively the feasibility stage for the project. We check finance and funding costs. We allow a provisional amount of 10% for funding the project, since that accords with our recent experience. In certain circumstances, the actual amount may be higher or lower. If we have a specific funder in mind who has indicated in principle their agreement to provide funding at a certain rate, we can home in on that. But until we have that, then we would use a rule of thumb of 10%. So significantly, property data uses a default of 4%, which is certainly not adequate in our experience, particularly recently when interest rates have been rising. So this is an example of gross development value feasibility calculation, which thus calculates the site value from gross development value less all development costs. The purchase price, we start off with a ballpark assumption. It may be the asking price, or it might be slightly less than the asking price. And we run a calculation based on that using the property data format, which is like this: stamp duty plus legals, architectural fees and project management. We allow 11% of the refurb stroke construction costs. And in this case, it's a building of 9,500 square feet. We've priced it at £87 a square foot plus VAT for average standard. Now, this is a very low figure, and you may well be looking at twice that figure for a heavy refurbishment. This is very light refurbishment we charged in this case. So we've got a subtotal of 1.899 million. We add contingency 10% and finance cost 10%, so that makes 2.278.8 million as total costs. We look then at the average asking price in the area for residential, assuming that's the purpose of the redevelopment. So we look on Nimbus maps and cross-check it on Rightmove, on the market, and Zoopla, and we establish a value per square foot, £325 in this case. And using the developed area, so that's 9,500 square feet, times the average residential value, it's actually not the asking price. What we're after is the actual sold prices, which we get from land registry. So I must amend this slide here. But for the purposes of this example, we'll assume it's correct. 9,500 square feet times 325 gives you a gross development value 3.08.5 million. Thus, taking the gross development value, subtracting the cost, gives you a gross profit of 808,000. So we would not use less than 33% at this stage, since all calculations of costs are approximate, and you may well find that your costs are actually higher than this. So this one runs out at a profit percentage of 35.4%, which we would deem to be acceptable, i.e. 33% plus. We would probably also keep looking if it were 25%, but certainly any less than 25%, and we would hesitate to proceed with the development. It may be something we would proceed with, particularly after risk assessment. We find that the risks are relatively low, and we can reduce the contingency percentage and thus increase the projected profit. So construction costs are especially volatile currently, and that's why we double check these estimates using proprietary estimating software. We do use a system called C-Link and also other software as well. So that's a run through of how we do a typical evaluation of a development site. Site location, specific address, postcode, Nimbus maps to enter the specific address and postcode and identify the title holder, or we could use search land is another one, or land search is another one that do similar sorts of things. We then use property data to do an initial calculation of possible gross development value, and we then check with other construction estimating software to double check the property data figures. Then we carry out a preliminary risk assessment on the project. We check the finance and funding costs, so we would use crowd property, Brickflow, or other crowdfunding or funding sources that we have. So an example of the gross development value feasibility calculation is there, where we run through assuming a purchase price and all the relevant costs, plus contingency, plus finance cost, gives a total cost to develop the project. Gross development value based on the local residential value that we get from land registry or some of the other sources that I've mentioned there, but we need to be careful. We're not looking at asking prices, we're looking at sold prices. So take the gross development value, subtract the cost, giving you a gross profit, and identify the percentage on the amount of money that you invest, percentage on cost or on your own investment. If you're not investing your own funds, if you're investing other people's money, then provided they're getting the percentage that they require, then it may be well worth doing the development, because you may have none of your own money in there and you're able to make money from the development. So that's a quick overview of our evaluation method for any site typically, and I'll gladly have a look at any site with any potential joint venture partners. We're constantly doing this sort of thing, and it's no difficulty to run a quick calculation, see whether the project stacks up for the particular purpose in mind, whether it's HMO, co-living, or our preferred model, which is serviced accommodation, or other such as residential, or it could be retirement residential. Lots of different purposes for converted buildings, especially in the commercial to residential field, which is what we're looking for at the moment. So if you do have a site that you think is suitable for conversion, you don't really know whether it's suitable, just give me a ring. That's alan@alpusgroup.com, or schedule a call with me at calendly.com/alanje, or my landline number +44 333 224 1257, mobile +44 7539 141257, or drop me an email, alan@alpusgroup.com. Okay, that's all for now. Cheers.